So this is my first ever interview, so you're gonna have to bear with me. Um, but yeah, I already started recording, so let's give it a shot. Um,
Sounds good to me. Thanks for having me on.
yeah,
How's my lighting? Is turning out okay?
yeah, I think it looks pretty good. I think
Okay.
you got a real room. I'm in my car here. It's like 120 degrees outside, so I thought
Keep the car on.
yeah, might as well. Also, because of like all the stuff going on in my part of the world, everything's closed. So car is today's office. Um
Man, yeah, be safe over there. You're in Budapest, right?
no, I'm in a war-torn country in the Middle East.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So got the rifle, my
Ready to go. Yeah.
ready to go. Um so yeah, man, you and I met a few weeks ago and I was just really, really impressed with you. I thought it'd be great to do this interview together. So please,
I
if
appreciate
you can,
that. Same to you.
yeah, man. If you could please tell me, for the sake of the camera, a little bit about yourself. You are a SAWTA certified watchmaker, and among other things. So please go ahead and tell me like where you're from and how you got into
Yeah,
watchmaking.
of course. Well, thanks, Jake. Yes, my name is Mitchell Thompson, and I'm a SAWTA certified watchmaker. SAWTA stands for the Swiss American Watchmakers Training Alliance, and this was a certification developed in 2001 by Rolex, specifically for the American market, uh, to fill the void of watchmakers that had left the industry throughout the 20 years prior, where there was a big uptake of mechanical watch demand through the 90s. And Rolex, in preparation for that, focused on the American market's development for watchmaking education. And I attended the Lidditz Watch Technicum, which is one of two schools that offer the SAWTA certification. And the certification focused specifically on micromechanics background in education, lathe work, knowing how to file, how to saw in all the traditional watchmaking methods, in addition to many of the modern needs that other watchmaking programs um, hadn't filled as fully. Modern needs meaning how to polish a watch, how to interact with our client base within the Rolex brand, anyway, and working within boutiques directly facing the customer, which is a big change from how watchmaking used to be, which was in the back room, not talking to anyone and hidden away.
Yeah,
And
that's
there
sort of
came also a
everybody's
need.
image of the watchmaker, in a very secluded
Exactly.
place. And yeah,
Yeah, there came also the need for a standardization of watchmaking knowledge and competency. So the SAWTA certification spearheaded a lot of that, taking standards that existed with other certifications like the WOSTEP
yeah.
certification, which has been around longer than SAWTA, but they further developed the customer interaction and the polishing segments that WOSTEP previously hadn't, so that we could uh, alone and independently operate a watchmaking workshop. Often, watchmaking education was very movement focused, and watchmakers would get in the field and not know how to set hands on a watch or not know how to pressure test a case, where a more comprehensive education was necessary. So that's
So,
my educational background. And I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan, and I grew up around the big three automotive companies here in the US. And all my family worked for GM and grew up with cars, really. Cars are great, but you need a big garage and they don't really fit on a desk. So
yep.
when I learned about watches, I knew for me that the culture and the ability to work on mechanical things was definitely up my alley.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's it was always a sort of a dream of mine to go to watchmaking school, and I didn't. I kind of went the other route. I went to the design route. But a couple of questions I want to ask you about that is, um, first, maybe you can dive a little bit deeper into the differences between WOSTEP and SAWTA, um, which are, as far as I understand it, they're the basically the two watchmaking schools, at least that are offered in the United States. And
Yes.
and then I want to ask you about the differences between a service technician and an actual watchmaker, because I think there's a lot of confusion there. And a lot of people call themselves watchmakers, but they're really just a technician. Not to, put those people down, but there definitely is a huge difference on in the education level.
Yeah, I'd be happy to speak on those points. I'll at length go into watchmaker versus technician. There's a
Okay.
lot of information there I'd like to clarify. But before I delve into that, I'd like to first set up the structure of SAWTA versus WOSTEP. And again, SAWTA is Swiss American Watchmakers Training Alliance, and WOSTEP is the Watchmakers of Switzerland Training Education Program.
Okay.
So WOSTEP was the first internationally recognized standardization of watchmaking education. This, in large part, came out of Switzerland with the realization that not all of their watches could make it back to Switzerland for repair, and it was necessary to help support the industry abroad by training people globally within their regions to be able to perform services. And um, there are many brands, and the whole industry was involved in this. But a big driving force today behind WOSTEP is the Swatch Group, and many of the training and education programs support their brands internally. Not to say that it's exclusive to Swatch Group. That's not really true, but a lot of the schools are sponsored by Swatch Group brands to help fill that void. And in large part, the WOSTEP curriculum focuses on what would be more corporate roles in a service center structure. So WOSTEP watchmakers have a strong, very strong emphasis on movement work alone. And in the service centers, it's all about specialization. So watchmakers work on movements. Then you delegate polishing to polishers who have just as much education in their polishing segment. And then to put the case and the movement together, you have casing technicians who specialize in that because you want each person in their role. And as we know from automobile manufacturing, if you specialize, you improve quality and efficiency in one hand there. Where that became challenging and not possible was at the boutique workshop where you have only one person who needed multiple competencies. And that's how the SAWTA curriculum evolved, were that we have watchmakers, but maybe they don't have polishing experience. Maybe they don't have casing up experience at the extent that they'll need to perform well. So in a bullet point summary, WOSTEP is a formal watchmaking education with a strong emphasis on micromechanics and movements. Very traditional watchmaking education and an excellent education. It's a very rigorous course and internationally recognized. This was the big highlight for that. Then the SAWTA certification was built off of the WOSTEP platform. All of the developers of SAWTA were from WOSTEP because that was the first education available. And they took everything they liked about the WOSTEP education and built on that to better support service in standalone shops at the boutique level. So there was a stronger emphasis on more comprehensive education, especially in the polishing area, because that's an area that often was neglected. But to be honest, polishing is one of the most important parts of watchmakers'
Yeah.
role because that's what the customer sees, and that's where all the money is in the case in the bracelet, especially on precious metal watches. That's really important that that be preserved. So that's essentially the main difference between those two. Very similar education, but the goal being supporting the retail front largely with SAWTA.
And,
And
sorry, before you move into the next segment, I probably
yeah,
should preface this whole thing to let everybody know that's one of the reasons we're having this interview is because you mentioned, it's not always practical to send watches back to Switzerland. And I, as a brand owner, we do all of our assembly and shipping and everything out of Switzerland, but I don't think it's very practical for our brand to send everything back to Switzerland either when something needs a repair. So you do services and repairs here and watchmaking here in the United States. Well, I say
yes.
here. I'm not in the United States currently, but you are.
But
Um,
where I am here
yes,
in the United States, yeah.
yes. And I was really looking for somebody who could handle customer repairs and services and everything like that in the United States. And you mentioning that you are trained in polishing and uh, case testing and all those other aspects is extremely valuable to a brand owner like me. And our plan moving forward is that you will be handling all the issues, customer issues in the United States. So, I
I'm glad to. That's part of brand longevity and customer trust. It's very important.
and you're so well spoken. I wanted people to be able to meet you and see
Oh,
who you
thank you.
are, so they know where their watch is going if there's ever an
Yes.
issue. Um, so with that said, yeah, please maybe tell us a little more about uh, the difference between a technician and an actual watchmaker. I know there's very few watchmakers in the United States. To get into one of the schools is very difficult and competitive. Um, Correct me if I'm wrong on anything, but there's, you can go to any strip mall and find somebody that calls themselves a watchmaker, but to find an actual watchmaker is something, it's a different animal. So please, yeah,
Absolutely.
go ahead.
Yeah, glad to speak about that. Watchmaking is an interesting profession because it has historical roots but modern need, and its evolution has all sorts of different opinions about what is really a watchmaker. And today, in the modern sense, I think it's safe to say a watchmaker, there are a few different types. And large part modern watchmaking is the repair and maintenance of modern and vintage watches in some cases, but often the vintage repair is a specialization within watchmaking. The same is to be said for independent watchmakers who are creating watches by hand themselves. That's not my profession, but that is a specialization, which many watchmakers eventually enjoy doing, but it takes years of building very specialized competencies to get to that level, so to say. So those are all types of watchmakers. Uh, and I want the viewers to have a vision of, as we enter the discussion between watchmaker and technician, we're talking about modern brands, large global brands that have massive volume. And there has to be a systematic service process for handling all that volume at regular intervals because the watches need repair. And to do that well, the service centers have a structure of specialization of different types of work. And that's where the division between watchmakers and technicians come into play. And I'll start by saying, in their specialization, technicians will run circles around watchmakers because they do it every day.
Yeah.
And that's what they focus their time in becoming really efficient and really precise about. And their knowledge is incredible and their skill is very high. And that's the design. That's the idea. We want a technician to focus on their role and be able to do that very well. And it's very common that technicians may work in different areas. Technician may be a casing technician where their whole role is assembling the polished watch and pressure testing that. They have to maintain cleanliness. They don't want to scratch the new parts that were just polished. They want to install the crystal correctly, all of these things. And that's their role. And that's what they do day in and day out. And they may spend, a few months to a few years in a certain role, and maybe they want to change it up. So then they go to the timing division where they learn about timing and adjusting watches. And what they do is after casing is exactly that day in and day out. And they get really good at it because they're working on a large volume. and so on and so forth. Many technicians end up wanting to attend watchmaking school and go more in depth with that. And many watchmakers may come out of watchmaking school and start in a service center. And many good service centers have the watchmakers work a period of time in each technician role to understand what's the flow like in that workshop. And it can be valuable in both aspects. You can't have one without the other. You need watchmakers and technicians. Um, so watchmakers, really, we are technicians, but we have a more comprehensive theoretical education and an all encompassing knowledge of how systems work together. Watchmaking is really about not only the physical competency, but the problem solving ability. And that critical thinking back end knowledge is really the differentiation in a watchmaker. We are designed to problem solve and troubleshoot efficiently. And that's the idea, where the technician role, not that they're incapable by any means, but their focus is to efficiently assemble and maintain flow. And if that's interrupted, it's more efficient for them to defer the problem and have it solved and then brought back than maybe having them stay caught up on that and losing production for all the others that would have been normal assemblies, where watchmakers are often then brought in to say, why did this fail? And our education allows us a systematic approach to efficiently resolve the issue and actually solve the problem, because it's easy to chase these hidden problems that you may perceive as an issue, but it's not really the problem. And all of a sudden, hours go by, and
Yeah.
your production is cost due to that.
And I think it's important to clarify too that when you go to an assembly factory, you have lines of technicians everywhere, and they all specialize in a certain phase of the assembly or
Yes.
regulation of the watch. But and that's different from. Sorry, I'm getting notifications. Let me turn off the.
Oh, no, no, please check. That's important.
No, no, no. I should have turned off my phone before. Anyway, um, so yeah, and that's a difference between lots of people you just find at a mall who work at a watch store or something, and basically they don't really, maybe sometimes they do, sometimes they don't have any formal training in watch repair or servicing, and maybe they just change batteries or who knows. I've heard all kinds of stories. It's a real mixed bag when you just go to a watch shop and ask for them to repair your watch, as versus
Yes.
somebody who actually has a certification, has gone through the formal training, what you're getting. It's like, going to somebody who actually went to a good medical school or just somebody who calls
Yeah.
themselves, yeah, I'm a medicine man. I can, take
Right.
care of it. Yeah. So,
Exactly so.
there's so much I want to get into with you. You have your own
No, please
background,
ask questions.
so
It's
many cool
great.
things. But before I get into that, I want to sort of go through the chronological journey. How did you, get the watch bug, and how did that take you to watchmaking school?
Absolutely. I was really fortunate to pursue what I loved as a career path and continue to develop that. I don't really go to work. I just enjoy what I do each day, and it's a lot of fun. I get to play with watches, and for me, it started. I knew. I knew since middle school I was interested in watches, and even before then, I knew watches were pretty cool. Each year for um, uh, the new school year, my mom would, okay, you need some shoes, you need some notebooks for school. And she was really traditional in a lot of aspects, where she made sure I had shoes with shoelaces and I would tie my shoes. None of this Velcro stuff. She says, I want you to know how to tie your shoes.
All
And
right.
in the same nature, she says, I think you should have an analog watch. I want you to have hands and know how to tell that. So she bought me a Timex in second grade, and I remember it was this blue plastic case, and it had a lightning bolt seconds hand. This is before I knew what a Milgauss was, but it was super cool. And it was on this elastic stretchy band. So I had that as my first watch. And from there, I just thought it was really interesting to see how the hands moved, and it makes this ticking noise and why. It's a pretty common story, but that for me was my formal introduction to watches. And ever since, I became more and more interested not only in the watches but also the culture. It's actually watches that led me to choosing my foreign language in school. My school had us choose at least one foreign language, and I chose French because reading about watches, I found all these vintage watch ads, but they were written in French. And I thought, oh, these would be cool to read if I understood what they were saying. So in middle school, I started studying French, and I went through university in pursuit of a French major. But we'll get to that in the chronological order.
Okay.
So through high school, I knew I wanted to go to watchmaking school, and my plan originally was to pursue watchmaking school in place of traditional university education. And I interviewed at Swatch Group School down in Miami for WOSTEP, and I had also applied to the Lidditz Watch Technicum in Pennsylvania, which is now being retired. There's some developments in watchmaking education, and a few other schools which have also evolved and some dissolved during this period of time.
Okay.
And I wasn't accepted into any of those schools my first run, so it changed my plans a little bit. I was a little bit derailed, and I said, "Wow, okay, so what am I going to do now?" So it was a great opportunity to get different experience. I was attending community college while working for um, uh, I worked as a technician actually in an occupational hand therapist's office, which was really interesting. Medicine is an amazing avenue and similar in some ways to watchmaking. Part of this story too is I had a hand injury when I was 15, and I had an excellent surgeon and I had an excellent hand therapist who ultimately later hired me.
Cool.
And
Yeah.
I worked for them for a few years, just learning about the profession, and um, ultimately didn't go the medical route. But I was then wanting to go advance my foreign language education, and I attended Michigan State University. And it was there in pursuit of my French major and I loved education too. So my plan was watchmaking, I'm going to come back to, but I love education and learning, and foreign language and society and developing psychology and sociology were really interesting to me. So I started down that avenue when I had an outreach from Shinola Detroit to work as a technician. They were looking for people. They saw my LinkedIn that I was interested in watches, and they reached out to me. So I one day went for this interview at Shinola, and I had just finished my class, and I get in the car and I drive across the state. It's like an hour or two, and I go to this interview and I get a job offer to work as a technician there full time. And the problem with that is I was also a student full time. So I couldn't be two places at once.
Yeah.
And I had to make a choice. And my mother, who originally bought this Timex for me, was really supportive. She says, "You always wanted to be in watches. I think you should do it." And my colleagues were supportive. A few called me crazy. It said, "You're abandoning your formal education
Yeah.
to go work." And I said, "Well, yeah, that's what I want to do." So I left my university studies and took a big risk to go for a job as a technician. And I worked as a repair technician for a few years and gained really valuable service center experience, as well as just industry knowledge in a brand, especially developing brand at the time, and uh, made some great connections. From there, I reapplied to watchmaking school, and finally, 5 years after my initial attempt, was accepted into watchmaking school. And
Oh.
attended from there, and that's the general timeline and
Okay.
how.
Let's do uh tell me about what it's like apply well, let's do this. I want to do one more question, then we'll take a break, then and then we'll come back. But
Sounds good.
this is the last question is what's it like trying to get into watchmaking school? I understand it's competitive. The tests are pretty difficult. From what I understand as well, you actually don't pay tuition to go to watchmaking school, but because the watch industry needs these watchmakers so badly, they pay for the schooling, but again, they make it pretty difficult to get in. And there's a lot of tests. That's just what I've read online. Please tell me what it's like.
Absolutely. So to that point, yes, I did not pay tuition to attend watchmaking school through the Lidditz Watch Technicum. Uh, that was unique to their course at that period of time, where other schools, depending the structure, there may be tuition. But that's really since dissolved because the need is now so high. Most have jumped on board with that competitive nature to make the process tuition free, albeit competitive. I was My class, I think, was the second largest graduating class out of Lidditz in its 20-year run. And we were 11 people. And all of us made it out. Most classes didn't. They cut in half by graduation. Average graduating class was 6 people through the 20-year period.
No, that's
Um,
crazy.
so they were sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. That's what was coming out of Lidditz to fill this void in the U.S., which the
Not to
rate
cut
of
you off,
that,
but I am going to cut you off really quick.
yeah,
While we're on the topic of numbers, how out of how many people apply that semester do you get those 11 people?
yeah. On those numbers, I would need to follow up with you on
Okay.
exactly how many, but as I recall, they're receiving several hundred applications, and from there, let's say there's 500 or 600 applications. That's cut in half through the interview process, and then reduced again, and then reduced
Okay.
again to the final selection.
This is like
Um,
a special forces selection, basically. I mean, in my military mind, think, okay, yeah, the guy goes to, whatever, buds like Navy SEALs or something, and they get like 10% or something. You're even further down than that. So
Yeah,
it's
they say our acceptance rate was less than 6% of the total applicants. And albeit how many people are applying to watchmaking school now more than ever, because there's a general societal awareness of the opportunity for the profession. But of the people applying, it is very competitive because most of us really want to be there. And that's also something unique, just as a side note, in this profession. All you are met with are passion driven people, which is a really big plus, as opposed to, oh, it's a job, I get by, it's,
yeah.
it's, no one's here without wanting to be. And that makes a big difference because the collaboration is a lot stronger that way because we all have a want to be here. And it makes a bad day a lot easier when you want to be part of it and overcoming those challenges. The application process for me was really it's a year-long process where you submit your application written initially. And the reason for this design is, yes, the programs are tuition free and they want to be sure that the people attending them are motivated and want to be in them. And they're really doing a psychological assessment on the people interested. Most times the physical competencies can be trained. It's a lot like fitness. You can gain those skills if you practice, just like playing a sport or anything else. But what you can't really train is someone's mindset if from the start they're just not wanting to do it. And they go through a selection process to vet people and put them through these trials to make sure that they want to stay. And that's very important because with the substantial investment they're making in these programs and the individuals within them, it's really important they stay in the profession, because that's the whole idea is we want this industry to continue. And that's why they're making that investment. But to do so, they assess everyone. So yeah, it's a written application about why you want to go to watchmaking school. And that's reviewed by a board of people. And if you seem to align with what their vision is, you'll get a phone call and they'll interview you on the phone. And after that, a few months go by, you might not hear anything. And then if they reach you again, you know you made it to the next phase, which is good, which is usually an in-person interview. And during that day, they put you through different tests, different assessments, and few have anything to do with watches. It's problem solving. They're testing team collaboration. They're creating scenarios that you don't even know what the design is, but they're putting artificial pressures on you to see how you respond. Because if a person doesn't have patience, this isn't a good profession for them.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're testing stress response and some general competencies. And
Bear with me a second. I
yeah,
got some kind of animal from the desert on me.
oh, that's great.
Trying to kill it. He's very strong. Jesus Christ. That is, holy shit. That is like a mean tick. I'll have to edit this out. Hold on. Huge. Oh my Lord. All right. I think he's dead. Okay. Back to the scheduled programming. All right, continue.
Amazing. That's just so authentic. I love it. Maybe that's inspiration for the next watch design, a limited edition massive desert tick is the
That is attractive. I like that.
yeah. Yep, it sticks to your wrist like a tick. That's
That's right. You'll never be able to get it off. The last watch you'll ever own. Uh,
yep, that's it.
all right, sorry, where were we? We were
Oh no,
talking,
it's
yes,
okay. The interview process for watchmaking. So then you have your in-person interview process, and it's pretty exhausting. They design the day to be very long, and they just put you through different tests. And at the end of that, you wait. And I was really fortunate. I got a phone call, and at the time, the administrator there asked me how I felt about living in Pennsylvania, and I said, "Well, I it takes what it takes. I mean, I don't know much about Pennsylvania, but if that's where I have to live, that's where I'll go." And she says, "Well, we'd love to offer you a position." And I was so excited, especially after the almost decade long period of wanting to do it and finally being able to have the opportunity to go. And that was just the beginning. The 2 years there in watchmaking school were they felt like 10 years. It was a very intense course, very
yeah,
intense, but learned a ton. And it was a really great experience, even for personal development. It teaches you things that you just have to go through and you appreciate once you're through them.
that sounds great. It reminds me a lot of, well, I work in
Your training, yeah,
military and
absolutely.
stuff. It really is about the mindset. You can train somebody, just like you said, their physical abilities, but if they don't have the right mindset, it's for naught. Um, so that's really interesting. That's great. I think what we're gonna do is I'm gonna take a bathroom break because I've been drinking a lot of coffee here. I'm gonna
Sounds
make
good.
sure that this has actually been recording correctly, and also Zoom kicks you off after 45 minutes if you don't pay for their thing. So I'm gonna end this. Let's like reconvene in 5 minutes, and I'll send you a new meeting link.
Sounds great, Jake. All
All
right,
right.
see you then.
All right. Thanks.
I got you. We're
Oh,
back.
great. We're back. Okay. Um, yeah, the recording recorded. So that's
Excellent.
that's there. Um, so I don't know where to go from here. I guess I wanted to go and delve into a little bit of technical stuff, especially we spoke before about Miyota movements, how they and Japanese watchmaking in general, how it compares to Swiss watchmaking, and sort of the philosophies behind the two types of movement designs and architecture. I used in this first watch that we're launching the Miyota 9075, and originally I was going to use the one of the Swiss GMT movements, specifically the Saprad GMT. And I just, all of the offerings for independent and micro brands from Switzerland are all collar GMTs. And as soon as the Miyota came out, it's the first, really available true GMT movement, or traveler's GMT, however you want to refer to it, on the market. And I just knew, for me personally and the brand, that's the way I wanted to go. I wanted the functionality first, but I still wanted to combine that with Swiss watchmaking and tradition. So we assemble and regulate all the movements in Switzerland and ship from there. And the brand is registered in Switzerland. But I wanted to kind of combine those two worlds, and I wanted to speak about them with an expert, and maybe you could shed some light on it. So maybe you could, give me your thoughts on how those movements compare to each other, specifically like something like a Solido or Soprod GMT to the Miyota 9075.
Absolutely. So
That's a
you've got
broad, I
both
know
some.
it's a broad question, but
No, no, it's a good question though, and it's a true question. I think this really, in a larger, even broader sense, brings to mind the differences in manufacturing between Japan and Europe, and why there is a difference, and what are those differences. So, in short, on the movement focus, I'd like to say both manufacturers, be it Japan or Switzerland, create really wonderful movements. But they do have their differences. Uh, and the architecture is different when you're inside these different movements. So within Swiss-made movements, there's a large focus on tradition, and that's visible through surface finishings, through movement layouts. I'll have to get some visuals over to you showing the differences between those common movements, because you can see when you look at these, just the positioning of all the wheels in the watch is very traditional in a Swiss layout, where all the wheels are visible and you have this beautiful surface finishing. Of course, you have choices depending what grade and everything, but a lot of traditional options between striping and perlage and um, a variety of industrial finishes. Uh, and that's really the takeaway I hold from Swiss watches is, oh, these are really beautiful, and these are great to work on, and the reliability is there. But with this visual and beauty complexity often comes some engineering complexity, where uh, the only way their systems can work is if they're executed at a very high quality, where there's no room for uh, less than excellent manufacturing. So your price point follows that, that the price per unit is much higher because the means of production have to be such that it functions. A few engineer friends of mine laugh and say over-engineered, that this is a system that could have been much simpler. It works, but it is very complicated, and usually when things become complicated, the reliability oftentimes is altered because there's more to fail. There's more manufacturing tolerances to be concerned about. But also in watches, that's kind of what we're excited to see. We like complex things and that beauty, but it isn't possible without excellent manufacturing, and therefore price goes up. Where Japanese design, reliability comes to everyone's mind with Japanese design, be it cars
yeah,
and everything else, but specifically their watches. There's all sorts of stories of Seiko's running 40 years and it's never, ever, ever been serviced and never will be because it's a Seiko, and this person just will buy a new one is often the approach. Uh, the way that's possible is through simplicity in design. And that simplicity in design might not have quite the robust beauty in an industrial way. Um, Again, of course, there are exceptions with very pristine independent watchmaking out of Japan, but in the common product line, you have some beautiful movements. Miyota's doing a really nice job with their striping and their finishings that are decorated. And they don't need to be anything more than that. But the reliability comes through the simplicity and the layout of those movements. Over engineering is not something they believe in. It's very much a function-based design philosophy, which when you're looking to rely on a watch to tell the time is pretty nice because it keeps your unit pricing down, but the quality is there. And that's something the Japanese could have chosen. They could have, with their designs, afforded to drop quality, but they maintained the same quality as the Swiss. They simply made the design less complex. And I think with that, you're getting insane reliability out of Japanese movements. Not that the Swiss aren't capable, but that simplicity isn't in their design philosophy because they're focusing on the sale of the tradition and what people are looking for. The Japanese could certainly make something more complicated, but it's just not in their design philosophy. So
Yeah.
I don't really see them as one is better than the other as much as within their scope of practice, they each have their benefits. And that's something to be understood that they're equally as capable manufacturers, but choose different, they make different decisions for philosophy reasons.
Yeah, totally. From my perspective, it is very similar to cars, like you said. I mean, Japanese cars are known for their reliability and I don't know if I would say they expect the customer to abuse the product and for it to keep working, but they design it so if that's the case, it will continue.
Yes.
To drive, I used to do military contracting in Africa, and we always drive Toyota Hiluxes, and that's like
Yeah.
the most
The
famous
standard.
like warlord vehicle, right? But it's for a reason. Those things just go and go and go. And my first watch was a Seiko. That thing lasted forever. And I really love the Miyota 9 series. I think it's a huge difference from their uh, 8 series that they've had for so long. I think again, please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not a watchmaker, but the um, the movement architecture seems to be modern, simple, reliable. The finishing has striping on the movement where you don't get that in the base Swiss calibers. Um, and it's very thin.
Yes.
The Miyota 9075 is relatively new, but it's based on the 9 series, like, the 9015, which has a great track record. It beats at 28,800, and it has, in my mind, I don't see very many downfalls compared to the Swiss competitors, and it just seems better overall. I really like the fact that it has a unidirectional winding rotor, which just puts less wear on the movement. I don't have to worry about hand winding it. Um, I love it. I just love the movement. I think it's great, and I think probably we'll see a Swiss version of it come out from Le Jeux Perret at some point. Nobody's. I don't have any. I don't have any special insider knowledge on that, but I do think that will happen. So I'm very happy to use it. Um, where else? Well, yeah, what do you think about that statement?
Yeah, yeah. So on the subject of unidirectional versus bidirectional winding, um, most movement manufacturers, we can get the basics down, and there's no problem when it comes to the gear train to tell the time. But the challenge comes into often the automatic system. And I encourage people, if they're curious, to look up old watches and how they've evolved with their automatic systems. Even, 50 years ago, they were trying everything, all these different designs, all these different versions. And the automatic system takes a lot of wear and tear every day on the wrist, constantly winding back and forth. And bidirectional winding is always promoted for its efficiency and all of this. But there's a lot of parts in those systems, and more often than not, they fail before the main movement does. And the watch is going in for service because the automatic system failed, nothing to do with its timekeeping. And well, it can affect timekeeping, but the winding system has failed. Where in simplicity and design there, I think is really important because it is such a wearable part of the watch, and there is such forces on that part. The more simple, the better, because you can get more life out of the watch. So unidirectional all the way, less parts, less maintenance, and reliability goes up, which I think is really important when it comes to especially the winding system. Um,
And I assume you're able to make the movement thinner because of that as well. Would that be
Yes.
accurate?
Often that thinness is coming from the components that that transfer the energy from the oscillating weight to the mainspring are now under the same bridge as the rest of the gear train. Where traditionally you would have the gear train and then modularly on top you would attach the automatic system, but that has its own bridges. So the thickness would naturally be larger. There is a service benefit to that where knowing often the automatic system will fail, you can remove that alone and service it without touching the rest of the movement. But the benefit of the thinness comes in when they're all under the same bridge. And to be honest, if you're servicing the automatic anyway, you should check the rest of the movement. So I really don't think that that's a loss, but you're just opening the hood and looking at everything instead of segmenting that modular design. And you have a lot of benefit with the thickness being reduced and under the same bridge design.
Okay, great. I also want to touch on, um, I wanted to regulate all the movements to 5 positions. I thought that was a good standard to use, and they're all regulated to plus minus 8 seconds per day. We could have
Nice.
tightened that up a little bit, but I didn't want to make any crazy promises on this first run of watches.
Sure.
But I think plus minus 8 is pretty respectable.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, that's real nice.
yeah. Um, so maybe you could go into a little bit how that process works of regulating a movement, and what all the different positions mean. What does that mean? 5 positions. I could explain it, but I'm sure you could explain it a lot better than I can.
Sure. So when it comes to the regulation of watches, you have a few factors always working against you. We haven't created perpetual motion yet, so there will always be friction, no matter what you do. And unless you're in space, there's gravity all the time, which can't get away from it, always there. So those two elements are really where timing gets interesting because everything we do is combating those realities and physical constraints. Um, in a vacuum and with no gravity and no friction, in the ideal world, a movement would run very consistently with no deviation. And let me get back to deviation, meaning if zero, perfect timekeeping, it's running the same rate all the time and doesn't change. That's perfect in textbook language. But these gravitational and frictional effects will change that deviation to a little faster or a little slower throughout the day. And those are the realities. So the different positions, what do they mean? Um, there are two main categories. There are the dial positions, which the dial is either up or the dial is down. Um, and then there are the stem positions, which there's a variety of stem positions, meaning the watch is on its side. Um, and the critical thing to understand in a mechanical watch is the regulating unit, the oscillator, or the balance wheel. It's a combination of a flywheel on an axle with a hairspring, and below it, an impulse pin and roller table, which has various features. But the main unit, that organ, is what we're talking about. And that axle, in the dial positions, is on its tips. It's on the top or the bottom, depending, dial up or dial down. And the frictional forces are greatly reduced in those positions because you're just spinning on the tip like a top.
Okay.
Um, when you shift position to the stem positions, as we say, where the movement is now from dial to vertical, um, the axle is now riding on the sides of the axle, which is a greater surface area, and friction um, is greater. In addition to that, the hairspring is sensitive to gravitational pull. So when it's flat, yeah, it can have some side-to-side gravitational pull, but largely unaffected compared to the vertical positions where now these coils that have to breathe are really being pulled in different positions. Um, why we go through the different tests of stem positions is because also the spring shape does behave differently depending where the gravity is pulling from. So we check the different positions to assess its effect on the total timing. And there are adjustments that can be made to reduce those effects. There will always be effects. Our goal is to keep them as minimal as possible. And that varies on a few different things. Very high grade movements, very expensive movements have alloys in those materials that create even tighter tolerances where the deviation isn't as great. Um, but more cost-effective movements might not have those same alloys, and the deviation is a little larger. But it's important to know that if you're making a watch that keeps the time, these alloys, I mean, a lot of it is marketing. The alloys are pretty good. They have to be, even in more base, simple movements. Uh, there are certain additives and things that can be added to improve precision, which comes with a higher price point and expense. And they do improve the watch, but in large part, your base movement is capable of near chronometric precision with the right adjustments. What then comes in is the time and labor to make those adjustments on those movements is in large part why we see often they aren't adjusted. It's not that they're incapable, it's just that the labor taken to get them to that point, especially if they're lacking some of those adjustment systems that make that process easier, it can take a little longer. Um,
Okay.
so formally, the different positions, you have dial up, you have dial down, and then stem, meaning 3 o'clock. If you're looking at your watch where your stem is, 3 o'clock, we do stem up, stem to the left, and stem down
Okay.
traditionally. And there's your five positions. The sixth position, which is a little bit debated, is stem right, which is as it is on your wrist when you check the time. Stem right is a position that usually sees more error than other positions and often is omitted because it creates such deviation. Not that we're ignoring it, but it's an anomaly and it doesn't spend a lot of time in that position compared to the total average. So it creates an outlier that isn't really conducive to the actual performance of the movement.
Oh,
Um,
interesting. Okay.
so that's often why you see the five positions compared to six. And you can, some do test six positions, but often the effect on that sixth position has an effect on the total average that may make an adjustment that wasn't necessary, that it otherwise would have performed equally as well, that wasn't necessary. So that's why you see five positions. So five is the standard.
Okay. Yeah, I just always knew five was the standard. But I learned something with that sixth position. That's interesting. Um, all right, great. I know when we first met, we spoke a lot about other cool engineering stuff, and I was very excited but anyway, this interview is going on quite a bit, and I want to get to some other stuff too. I want to talk about your own brand, ONVA. Where did the
Oh,
name
yeah,
come
thanks.
from? How did you come up with the idea for it? And then we'll get into some of the other projects that I know you're working on as well.
Yeah, glad to. So, ONVA is from a French expression, ONVA, which means let's go. I took the E part out of it and just say ONVA, which is still let's go in rough translation. And for me, it was a little bit of an homage to my French studies and my other life that I abandoned for watchmaking. And I like the name. It was simple, and it has a cool story behind it. Originally, working as a retail watchmaker and maintaining contacts with uh, colleagues through the industry I worked for previously, like Shinola and other brands I just met through the years and other watchmakers. I found coming across my bench were a lot of requests for some feedback or, hey, we're running into this issue. You work on these different things. Can we get a fresh set of eyes? And it started organically with a few requests, and then friends kept coming back and asking more questions, and it was good. And then they're like, "Well, this is more than friends asking friends questions. Now our team wants to talk to you because we have more questions about this, specifically from brands with production troubleshooting, and also some of their technician training and education, where maybe the methods they were using were creating issues inadvertently. So they would send me samples of their watches and specifically the failures, and I would service them and assess the reason for failure, and from there could create a comprehensive report to avoid that in the future, which at scale was really beneficial because it saved a lot of rework and time. So that started to become a business. And that's when I founded ONVA and said, okay, we're doing technical consulting and this is how we'll do it. And that was the beginning a few years ago. And since it allowed me an avenue to get creative and come up with new ideas and parts of the industry that I wanted to play a part in. Which is developing a brand. That's a personal project I've always wanted to do, and it's really been a journey so far. We this year launched our first model called the Utility, and it's a humble watch with true grassroots origin. It's from the watchmaker's bench, where I didn't have the budget or backing to do a massive campaign of completely custom design, but I could get some dials made.
Yeah.
And I sourced some cases that I liked, and I invested in a laser so I could customize engravings on those cases for our brand. And that's what the utility's been. It's a real utilitarian piece, and the utility is not only in its design, but also in its origin. That this is starting with the basics of getting a watch together and what would we want from a watch like that. And we're offering a 5-year guarantee on that watch because I'm a watchmaker. So I'd like to build relationships with those customers if they have issues and learn about their wearing habits to develop future product as well. So it's for the customer, but it's also for our business that allows us to continue that communication and continue to learn about who likes our watches. So that's where ONVA is going. We also have a few other divisions of ONVA. As you and I met, and as you know, the watch community is really powerful. And without the community, our products wouldn't really mean anything. This is much more a social cause than than it is just watches.
Definitely.
So I'm working on developing right now a publication called ONVA Magazine. And what we're going to do is have stories like yours and really unique stories that I've had access to in my experience through the industry that maybe haven't yet hit certain publications that are more recognized and have great coverage. But I'd like to do a little more niche publication. I'm thinking quarterly to begin and get people excited about some of these more interesting stories that aren't as mainstream. And we'll make the mainstream through this publication platform and get more engagement from the community, which our whole business relies on, and our whole lifestyle in watches relies on. It's about collaboration more than competition.
That sounds really exciting. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I, you know, it's just so cool to meet with another brand owner like you. I totally don't see it as a competition. We can all help each
Oh,
other.
no, not at all.
Enough
And we need
room
each
in this
other.
industry.
This
Yeah, we need each
ecosystem
other.
is you need each other. It can't be done alone.
Yeah.
And that's something even among jewelry stores carrying some of the major Swiss labels. They all work together. I mean, they have their client bases, but they're running the same type of business and they work together to help better develop what is their industry. And it's a really powerful thing. It's unique to this industry. A few others have it, but not as much. This is really special. Um, and yeah, so ONVA is also working on some new watch designs. We're going to have some more professionally fabricated releases into the new year, and we're developing that. And finally, the last division really to mention is our ONVA certification, which we're working on developing right now as well, where I want to bring more awareness to microbrands and these brands that are creating great diversity in the business, that they are technically as capable as some of the higher end watches. And my goal is to design a chronometer certification that is accessible to brands and collectors alike, where we will test your watch and provide you a certificate as a third party and with technical background to tell you its performance. We're going to follow the same standards that Kosk does as far as the testing process. And as far as precision goes, it will be within chronometer tolerances to earn our certificate. We will do the various temperatures, the various positions over the days and nights required to bring a certificate to you. But the difference for us is we're making the pricing accessible, where we want brands to be able to access it, that we don't have massive Swiss budgets, and we want consumers also to be able to submit their watches where maybe they did have their watch serviced and they want to see if it's still a chronometer. And you know, it's a cool opportunity, and from there we'll see where it goes and what the feedback is from the community. But I think it has potential to create some opportunity here with legitimizing smaller manufacture, that it doesn't have to necessarily be expensive to be quality, and that we can prove quality in smaller brands.
Yeah. Wow. There's so many things I want to touch on there. One is I just think that's awesome that you guys are going to do that. It also brings back watchmaking to the United States. I mean, we have such a great history of watchmaking in the United States that kind of got lost. And I love that you're bringing stuff like that back to the US. I want to go, before we delve deeper into that, I want to go back to your brand. I think the utility is a really cool piece. You did a great
Thank
job
you.
with that. And one of the things that's so cool about your story is that you're the watchmaker and you're doing really everything with that piece. Um, I started out as an enthusiast. I still am an enthusiast.
Me
I've
too.
collected, yeah. It- you know, that's the great thing about micro brands is a lot of it, we're not corporate guys who are just solely focused on profits with no souls and, no connection to the customer. When it comes to, and not to take away from the heritage brands, I mean, they're great. I love
No, no, they exist, but
but
they are at scale, and at scale things change.
at scale things change. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things brands like yours and ours bring to the table is that we welcome interaction with the customer and we really want to make a connection and a story with the customer. For my timepieces in particular, I really want people to go out there, like contact me, show me stories of what you are doing with the watch. If you're doing cool stuff out in some dangerous place, I want to see it.
You're all for it.
I'm all
And now you
for
have
it.
the
Yeah.
service support.
Yeah.
If something goes wrong, we will
Yeah.
fix your watch. Yeah.
Exactly. As long as you take cool pictures, that's the most important thing. Or, whatever people are up to. I love the fact that people can interact with me. I welcome that. And I like that they get to know a little bit more about the journey of how their watch was made, how it was designed, who's going to be servicing the watch. I think that's really special and one of the things that we can bring to the table that the big companies can't. They have
I
all the
agree with
budget in
that.
the world to do all sorts of other things, but we can, take feedback more easily. We can interact with the customer. We can work on designs together. Anyway, I'm rambling, but that was
No, I'm all in 100%. And your outreach is amazing. And I think in part why we hit it off so well is we come from the understanding that this is a socially designed uh, community. As much as turning screws and working on watches is don't talk to anybody, but so much of it is incredibly social. And without that social connection, this can't exist. And this draws people together. And it's harnessing that I think is our obligation and our contribution to this community is creating product and community that gets people excited. And we're happy to be a part of it. That's what we're here for. And on that point too, I should say, which I hadn't yet, the whole role of after sales service is backing consumer trust. And it is so much more to do than repairing the watch. This is about longevity and retention of client relationships, as well as maintenance of product. Again, a very social base for a technically related service.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, it's funny because I think it brings a social aspect to people who might not be social. For instance, I am extremely
Absolutely.
introverted, but when
Most
I
watchmakers are too.
yeah, but when you get to talk about something you're excited about, it changes. And how many times do you get to meet another watch enthusiast in person? I mean, we're out there, the community's out there, obviously
We exist.
exists, but on the day-to-day basis, you don't get to have those interactions. So when you get to sort of bring this group together, it gets very exciting and a lot of fun. Um, all right, we have 7 minutes and 30 seconds left because Zoom keeps kicking us off, so we might have to do a third part. But with this next question, I do want to get more into how you came up with the idea uh, for the movement testing that you want to do with the chronometer style certification in the United States. What's the feedback been like? I know you've been speaking to some people, and how would that work? I would love doing it with J.M.LEBOY definitely down the line. So please, yeah, go more into that because it's just so cool.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you for that support. And yeah, we're a bit in a development phase, our beta testing here and rolling out the program where in these preliminary discussions, I've got a lot of varied feedback, largely positive, actually none negative, but I would say some observational, saying, okay, if you do this, what is the end goal and what really are we looking to do in that type of endeavor? And uh, I have to give credit to conversations originally with Nick Manousis from Horological Society of New York. They've been doing a small uh, really an original version of this where Nick was telling me about their program and what they've been doing, testing some watches for brands and enthusiasts alike. Yeah, similar idea, of course. And I saw what he was doing and said, this is a really great idea. And I spoke with him. I said, Nick, what would you like to do with this? And he says, well, we're, kind of piloting our thing, but if you do your thing, that's great. We encourage it. No, it's a lot of work, is what he told me. And I said, okay, Nick, that sounds good. And so in part, I had some inspiration from seeing what he was doing, but also the true origin is seeing chronometer on a lot of dials. And you see that these watches are significantly more expensive than others. And you think, well, why is that? And of course, you learn about what a chronometer means. And, it's this beautiful mystical thing to be a chronometer. And more recently than not, we've seen smaller brands rolling out chronometers, and there's a desirability in the technical collecting community specifically for chronometers and precision. And as a watchmaker, I felt a little bit of an obligation to that, you know, uh, chronometers are cool. That means we did our job and the watch keeps time. So
Yeah.
to me, I saw it a bit as a natural transition. That was the inspiration anyway, is industry experience and conversations. Um, but largely it's been positive. The question I get is volume. How many watches do you want to end up rolling out? How many can you handle? I mean, we're going to have to scale to that if it grows to that type of demand, but I'm definitely open to some small batches and seeing what we can do and showcasing that value. Your watch performs within chronometer specs. It was verified by a third party who's a watchmaker,
Yeah,
and our goal is to uh, make those records accessible for the performance of the testing through a database that is publicly accessible. So we'll have
right.
a website that discusses the certification process, what that means, and offer consumer education and community education about what is a chronometer and what does that really mean, and develop from there what our vision is. And if we're doing third-party authentic chronometer testing, there's no reason why you couldn't put chronometer on your dial because you have a chronometer. It's been verified. We're doing this on cased up watches, not movement alone, as is done out of Switzerland, because it matters in the case. Putting the movement in the case changes timing. We want the final product to be verified specifically in this regard.
That's such a important point to make. I mean, once you put
Yes,
the movement in the case, it does things shift, things change. I
absolutely.
I just think it's so great. I know everything is digital nowadays, but I would love to be able to put some sort of hand certificate in with each watch that says, "Hey, this
Yes.
was regulated, on this date, and this is what it passed."
That would be great. I'd love to develop that with you to see what
That'd be
your
great.
vision is for what that should look like. I'm all for ideas. I think that we need to develop exactly that, where you have a card that you'll receive, as well as you can look up your serial number and the brand, and you can see the last
Yeah.
testing and how it performed. I think that's the value there.
Yeah, definitely. Both of those aspects are so cool to be able to actually have a database is amazing. And I think that's really where a lot of the magic with mechanical watches lies. Of course, we all have our phones. Anybody could buy a G-Shock and you'll have,
It has nothing to do with keeping time,
yeah, it's really not. It,
ironically.
yeah, it's the magic of the craftsmanship that goes into mechanical watchmaking. And you can slap a movement into a case and call it done. But just like I'm doing with the Bedouin GMT, I wanted that craftsmanship connection. So that's why we're making such a big deal about the specialized assembly and the regulation of the movements. And that's why I'm so excited about what you're doing. I think it's great. All
Well,
right.
thank you. We're excited too.
I'm going to cut this off because we got 1 minute left. I'm going to send you a new link and
Perfect.
I'll promise it won't be too much more because I know we're using a lot of time here, but I'm having a good
Oh, it's
time.
okay. It's great. This is valuable. This is very important time. So, all right, I'll look forward to the new link.
All right. All right. Now we're live. Okay. I really need to upgrade to the Zoom Pro or whatever it is. So I don't have to keep doing these breaks. Um, all right. Last question I have for you, and I'm not sure if we'll keep this in, but what is the one tool that you would recommend every watch enthusiast have? Obviously we don't want people going in and like, trying to do repairs themselves because that would void warranties, etc. But is there something in particular besides a spring bar tool that you think every enthusiast should have on their in their arsenal, so to speak?
Of course. I mean, for an enthusiast and the more technical collectors who are interested in watches, I think a natural evolution and great next step to learning about watches, in particular the watches you have, is a timing machine. It's a time grapher, and uh, they have a really interesting history. It wasn't that long ago that watches were tested manually, and you just looked at where the hands were over many days and nights to verify everything, which really was a different time. Now we can instantaneously see the performance of the watch, and it greatly improves our service process. But for An enthusiast, you can purchase timing machines out of Asia for under $200 in the US, and their quality is good enough for what you need to check. I have one here that I bought off of eBay for $150 like 10 years ago, and it still works, and it's been great. And of course, the material quality isn't the same as the Swiss ones. I do, however, at my day job, where we're working on Rolex product, we of course have the Swiss grade machine, which those machines are typically $8,000 to $10,000. The Swiss versions, which are a substantial investment, but the microphones are really beautiful. The build is amazing, and they're very precise. I tested my watch on this Chinese machine and then took it into work and tested it there, and I was getting the same results. So the electronics and the microphone are really good for the price, and there's no reason to buy the expensive Swiss one, unless, of course, you're in the professional environment where you need that for production or shop requirements. Um, but I would encourage any enthusiast to get one and see how their watches are running, and we can talk about the different information it gives you. It tells you your daily rate in that position, which is ever variable. It's constantly changing. So you're taking an average of those numbers to actually have a true reading. Um, you can view the beat error, which is an adjustment in the watch. It has to do with the positioning of the uh, hairspring and how it affects the overall positioning of the uh, impulse pin, which engages with the pallet fork. That's how centered that impulse pin is in the notch of the fork is the error. If there's no error, it's zero. If it's slightly to the left or the right, you'll see the beat error increase. And that centering is important because it affects the amplitude reading. And amplitude is the total displacement of that impulse pin from its 0 point in the swing during oscillation, which is an indicator of how much energy is getting to the oscillator and regulating unit. If your amplitude is low, usually there's interference somewhere that isn't allowing efficient energy transfer. Could be lubrication, could be contamination, could be magnetism, a million different reasons. But the time grapher will show you how it's performing all through acoustic feedback from the escapement, which is pretty amazing. In the escapement, there's five shocks in the Swiss lever escapement that happen almost simultaneously. It's so fast, sounds like a tick and a talk. And this machine listens to those five shocks and interprets that data to give an output about that information. It's pretty amazing.
Right.
Um,
That's exactly how it works, right? It's a microphone listening to the ticking of the watch and telling you the
yes.
accuracy from there.
Exactly. And that technology's been amazing. And you can read about time graphers, especially the industry standard is Wishy. They make a lot of industry tooling, but the prices follow because they are making very high quality equipment at, in my opinion, relatively low production numbers because there's the industry they serve, but it's not like automobiles or anything else where the means of production bring the price up quite a bit per unit is pretty expensive, but it has to be. And they're pretty much the only people making them, which is another reason why. And
I,
they're the trusted standard.
I have one of those as well. When I decided to create the company, I wanted to take a watchmaking course as well. Of course, my watchmaking course was nothing like what you went to. Mine was just an online course, but I wanted to be able to service watches just in case there was,
Yeah, definitely.
sort of a third line of defense here. So I invested in all the tools and, disassembled and regulated a bunch of old watches, just moving through the different
That's
complications.
great.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And in doing that, I realized I'm not built to do this as a profession. I'm much better suited to designing, but I'm glad that I have some basic knowledge of how it works. And I have a Weishi, I don't know how to pronounce it. One of the
Yeah.
time graphers as well. And I think you touched on something too. I always recommend people to get a demagnetizer, and I think those two tools really are just great for an enthusiast. Especially they're not too expensive, and
No.
if you think you may have some magnetization on your watch, you take it to the time grapher, it's running a little off. The easiest step is to put it on the demagnetizer, which is just a little box. You put the watch
Yep.
on it, hold the button down, and slowly pull the watch off, and it's demagnetized. And we live in a world with so much magnetization everywhere.
Oh,
Um,
definitely.
yeah,
And yeah, I mean that's a big cause of precision errors, and that's actually the first thing I do if there's a timing issue after understanding service history. You know, if the watch is 20 years old, we know there's other issues. But
yeah,
if it's a watch under guarantee or relatively new and or recently serviced, we know that more likely than not, everything's in order. But if not, we'll get into it. And the first thing we can do with no invasion to the watch is demagnetize it. So we'll check it on the time grapher. Whatever the reading is, it is. And we'll compare it to after demagnetization. And if it's improved, often that can be a pretty simple solution without having to do anything to the watch. We work systematically least invasive to most invasive. We don't want to do anything more than is necessary, especially when you know history about the watch.
yeah, just like a doctor. I mean,
Exactly.
yeah,
That's the same approach. It's a systematic approach and it creates an efficient output.
yeah, I totally agree. I guess that's it, Mitchell. It's been great talking to you. Just from a personal perspective, like every time we talk, it's just so exciting for me. Uh,
Well, same here, Jake. I can't thank you enough for the time and wanting to have a chat and learn more about me. It really means a lot, and it's been a great opportunity to talk about what we love and watchmaking and uh, share a little bit about ONVA and what we're doing and learn more about what you are doing. We've got a lot of exciting things coming.
yeah, definitely, definitely. And if you bought your watch and you're in the United States, or probably will do the same for Canada, uh, this is the guy who's going to be taking care of your timepiece if anything goes wrong. So do not be afraid.
I'm happy to help
Yes,
and happy to answer questions. And this is what it takes is a community to support it. And we're really excited with your brand, Jake. You've got a great product. The quality's amazing, and I'm really excited to see all that comes with your project. It's really making waves. It's really looking good, and excited to see all that comes.
ditto, ditto. I can't wait to see more from Anva and just excited to continue working together. All right, guys, gonna end it there. Hope you all have a good one and you enjoyed the show.